Pieter Kruger. I'm a consultant clinical psychologist and professor of clinical psychology, and I get to spend my time in an interesting range of environments between elite sport and business. And in the previous talk, we started looking at performance under pressure, spoke a little bit about the similarities and difference between sport and business. But I want to take it into this one and add to what we've said in the previous one as well. But this is more than enough to act as a standalone. If you did not see the previous one, you'll get something from this still. Where we started talking about performance under pressure, what I want to dip into now is the difference between pressure and stress. Because the reality is everybody's under pressure nowadays in this modern world in some way or another. Not everybody has the same stress response. So we like to use these words interchangeably, like they mean the same thing, and that's absolutely fine from a general linguistics perspective, but technically there's a big difference between pressure and stress. So we're going to make a distinction between these and then talk a little bit about the function of stress, good stress and bad stress, and maybe how to manage that a bit better. Now, pressure effectively will be the things in the environment, people, places, situations, or things, where stress is the reaction we have to pressure after appraising the situation. Now, imagine for a moment, I can sort of show you this picture of a lion chasing a zebra in an open savanna environment. If we freeze frame for a moment and we look at the zebra and we look at the lion will be the pressure. So that's the something in the environment that can be quite life-threatening or threaten at least the zebra in the moment. And my particular choice of animal here, zebra, we could go for any mammal for that matter, because the part of the brain we share with them is this inner part of the brain called the limbic system. So for animals, it's their reaction center. For us as humans, it's the emotional processing center. But stress per se is a physical chemical reaction we have by the release of the stress hormone cortisol in the system after we've appraised the situation, which might be people, places, situations, or things. Now, in a situation like that, if you hit the play button again, let the scene play out, lion catches up with the zebra and it has itself a lovely feast. Once you observe the rest of the zebra herd 45 or 60 or 90 minutes later, what do you think will you see? You just look at them, observe what they do. The reality is probably nothing. They'll be grazing, minding their own business like nothing happened, not sparing a single thought for the colleague they've just lost, because they only apply the stress mechanism when it meets the following criteria. They apply acute situational stress when it's about dealing with a life-threatening situation, so something that can actually jump on you and can scratch you in the face and rip out your throat or devour you, so very useful. If it requires physical action, i.e. fighting or running, so to get out of there or deal with the situation. And thirdly, if it is short term. So our bodies have been designed to deal with this release of cortisol, the stress hormone, for 10 and 15 and maybe 45 or maybe 60 minutes. It's never been designed to deal with this for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. We've not been designed to do that. This is why we are seeing so many stress-related diseases in modern times, because it seems like we have this continuous low-level secretion of cortisol into the system. Now, just back to the lion and the zebra for a moment. In that situation, freeze frame, lion and the zebra, clearly if that zebra had half a brain, or at least that part of the brain was intact, it would quickly appraise the situation and come to the conclusion, this is a life-threatening situation. It meets all three of the criteria, so no wonder there's a massive release of cortisol in the system. It gives it the energy to fight or run, because that will trigger the release of adrenaline as well. And in this case, it's sensible enough not to fight, but to run. So it's a very useful mechanism to have an acute stress response if it meets the criteria. The problem we have as human beings is we've got this cortical part, the gray and the white matter around the limbic system, where thinking processes come into play. So the problem is, for a moment, if you change the lion with a cat, we still kind of get ourselves into the situation where we overinterpret the situation. We assume it's a threatening thing, but we have the response like it's a lion, but in fact, it's actually a cat that might be in the environment. So this tendency to overinterpret the situation, either misinterpret the situation or assume that something is worse than it actually is, still will trigger that reaction. But what we do as well, we take it one step further because of the thinking processes. We start thinking about the what ifs. So where nothing is present, there's not a lion or anything in the environment, but we start thinking what if. What if I can't? What if things go wrong? What if the client doesn't like it? What if we don't hit the quarterly targets? What if we lose the game? Regardless of what the the thought might be, the body will still respond in a similar way, because the problem is, once the thought is there, the body doesn't ask the question whether it's true or not. Very often we just assume things on face value. Whatever your mind tells you, we believe it to be true. So we have a response as if there's a lion, the threat in the environment. But now the problem is, wherever you go, there it is, because we're not talking about the actual fear response, which is a reaction we get when we face a real danger or threat. We're talking about anxiety, which is technically a false alarm to a perceived threat. So there's nothing there. It's mental. It's in your mind. So the problem with anxiety, with fear, we need the response there in the odd situation when needed. But anxiety is a mentally triggered situation, which means wherever you go, there it is. So if you have a 10-hour workday that's massively stressful, you go home and you worry about work for another 5 hours. The body cannot tell that you've not been at work for 15 hours. You would have had a 15-hour release of this cortisol into the system, which is not a great situation to be in. If you think about human stress, most of what we face nowadays is psychological. We don't live in the times anymore where everything is out to kill you, and around every bush and corner there's something that's going to jump out at you and devour you. But although the times change significantly, neurologically we still stay fairly similar. So this effectively means that a big part of what we experience from a stress perspective is triggered by our own thought processes. So becoming aware of what we think about and how we interpret the triggers will be a very important part in managing our own stress responses in the situation. Now, if you look at what we call the performance stress curve, so the higher it goes, the higher the performance, and the longer we stay at stress, what happens to that performance? There's a little bit of an inverted U where you need some stress to perform well. If you had no stress whatsoever, things like deadlines will become mere suggestions, or you might turn up on time for work, or you might hand in that assignment, which is clearly not a good way to perform. But if it becomes more stress than you need, so kind of overly stressed about things, the performance is actually going to start coming down. It's not a straight line correlation that the more stress you have, the better you're going to perform, or even the other way around. So it's about finding that optimal level where you understand that some stress is good, it helps you to get there, but too much stress, unfortunately, will start interfering with the thinking processes in the process as well. So in order to get there, it's a process of stopping, thinking about the triggers, but we call it the process of metacognition, thinking about thinking. So realistically evaluating the triggers you are up against, not just going through the motions, because very often it is not a lion in the environment, but we make it so because of the way we think about it. In the words of the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, he said that people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. And that is absolutely true if you take a look at the cognitive system involved in how we interpret the triggers. So please have a good awareness of what the typical triggers are, but also your interpretation of them. Because once you start creating that awareness, you are one step closer to putting some good strategies in place to deal with it. What we will do in the next session is talk about the influence of cognitions and the neurochemical responses there. And you'll see how this will further explain why it's such a tricky thing to do. But for now, at least, suffice to say, just understand that human stress is mainly psychological nowadays, which gives us the great news that there's something we can do about it. We'll unpack in future sessions how we do that, but for now, at least, walk away with that level of awareness. If you have any thoughts or comments, please leave it in the comment section. But otherwise, please join us for the next talk as well. Thank you.